Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to the Meet the Grantmakers panel. My name is Angela Richardson, and I'm a senior trainer here at the Grantsmanship Center. And it is my pleasure on behalf of the center to welcome you to our first panel of 2025. So if this is your first time here, we welcome you. There will be a panel of different guests that I'll introduce in just a moment. And we'll have an hour-long discussion about the philanthropic world, securing grants, and a host of other different topics. So I want to say a quick thank you to all of you who submitted questions, and I want to thank our partners and our sponsors. So I'd like to thank Grant Station and Foundant. It is this partnership that brings this quarterly conversation with grant makers to all of you. So thank you all for being here. And if you've been with us for multiple panels, we welcome you back. So with no further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce our panelists, our illustrious panelists for today. I'm going to start with Carlos Martinez. Carlos is the president and CEO of the Latino Community Foundation in Denver, Colorado. Next, I'd like to introduce Jan Ross. Jan is the Executive Vice President of Philanthropy at the Huey and Angelina Wilson Foundation in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, which I've been to many times. I love Baton Rouge. And last but definitely not least is Nancy Hales. She is the Executive Director of the HDR Foundation in Omaha, Nebraska. I have yet to get to Nebraska. We will, in a minute, I'll give them an opportunity to introduce themselves and their foundations, to tell you all a little bit more about what makes them unique, who they are, some of their giving priorities, and anything that they want to share about their foundations. But also just know that in the chat, the link to the profile, so you can read in depth about their giving and all the details about whether or not this foundation is right for you. So look for that in the Q&A boxes as well. All right. So with no further delay, let's get into this conversation for today. And I'm going to start with you, Carlos. Please introduce yourselves and anything you'd like to share with our audience about your foundation.
Well, thank you, Angela. It's great to go ahead and be here, and also with my colleagues, Nancy and Jen. So, the Latino Community Foundation of Colorado has been around for about 18 years. We have community foundation in our name, but we don't quite operate like a community foundation. We're a non-endowed foundation, so we have to raise all our dollars every year for our grant making, our investments in the community. Over the past 18 years, we've invested a little over $30 million into the community. And on average, we probably invest about $1 million, $1 million to $1.5 million annually into the community. But we do have years that are a little bit different. Like last year, we invested almost close to $14 million. And that's because of how sometimes we do our work. So we raise dollars, but we also work with our state government to be an intermediary to be able to disperse dollars into our community. So our focus is working with BIPOC and LGBTQ communities throughout Colorado and smaller organizations. The majority of our investments that we do are investments in building the leadership of our communities, as well as doing capacity building. So we really don't fund a lot of programs. Mostly it's around really building up that infrastructure of these organizations to be key anchor organizations in their communities, as well as really invest in our leaders to be able to go ahead and think differently, think like we say, think big and act big, so that we can go ahead and have bold, transformative changes in communities. We do a lot of our investments through grants, trainings, convenings, with our grantees, so we provide a variety of things. We also then look at supporting our leadership as well. So it's just a variety of things that we do here at the foundation to really build up the capacities of our people, of our nonprofits, and of our communities. So I'll just stop there so we can go ahead and save more time for that. So I'll hand it back to you, Angela.
Wonderful. I'm looking forward to hearing more. Jan.
Very good. Thank you. And very nice to meet you, Carlos and Nancy. Very nice to join you and Angela. So thank you. The Huey and Angelina Wilson Foundation focused on the state of Louisiana and in particular the greater Baton Rouge area. The foundation was created in the mid 80s when the Wilson Foundation the Wilson family sold their business and they started their family foundation with $5,000. So until the year of 2000, they wrote checks to their favorite organizations, but then they started to make additional donations to the foundation. It grew, and we realized we really needed to have a formal grant making process. So we started that in 2000. And so we have been reactionary grant makers since then. About 4 years ago, we created a 10-year strategic plan, and that really changed how we do what we do. It didn't change what we focus on. Our focus has always been on human services, which is about 45% of our giving, education, healthcare, and also prison reentry programming. And like I said, it hasn't changed what our focus is. It's just changed how we do what we do. That focus was really created by the lives and the experiences of Mr. and Mrs. Wilson. They were both from very large families. Mr. Wilson was one of 23 children. So understanding basic needs and how important that is, having those met, that a person could really be on a trajectory for success. And so that is how our areas of focus have come about, ensuring that people have food, shelter, basic education, and most importantly, for especially what allowed Mr. and Mrs. Wilson to be as successful as they were, was a strong work ethic. So with our strategic plan, and like I said, we're about 3.5 years into it. And for many, that's like, many strategic plans are 3 years overdone. Let's get moving on. We feel like we're still implementing, still starting out in the implementation. And that strategic plan focuses on the nonprofit sector, because without the nonprofits, we're not able to do the work that we're set out to do. It also focuses on people, those living in poverty and the ALICE population, or the working poor. And then also we have a place-based focus for 5 particular neighborhoods in the 70802 zip code. And that place-based focus really follows the purpose-built communities model. And so, as I said, this is long-term work for us. And if you know anything about purpose-built communities, that is all about investing deeply in a small area for long-term. And as I said, the strategic plan really didn't change our focus, but it did change how we do what we do. And in implementing that, there were many organizations that we have funded for quite some time, had what you might consider evergreen relationships with us, but they no longer really aligned with our focus. And so what do you do with that? And that's very hard, because these are long-term relationships. It is about people. And it's not only people that our nonprofits are serving, but it's the nonprofits themselves, those that work in that organization. And so it is with our capacity building institute, where we are able to continue to invest in the organizations that may no longer align. And so for us allows following our strategic plan to really be a win-win on both sides. Not only us being able to invest in the community, but really to continue to build up those nonprofit organizations that we have partnered with for so long. So thank you very much for having me be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And I see that a question has come in already about sustainability. So I want to circle back to you on how do you do that and build that with the organizations that you work with, or what do you look for? So we'll come back to that in just a minute. So before we do that, though, I'd like to have Nancy please introduce yourself and your foundation.
Thank you, Angela, and thank you, everyone. I understand there's over 900 attendees, so welcome. This is really important work, and it's work I've committed most of my life to, so I feel like I'm among colleagues. So Carlos and Jan, I'm so glad to hear you mention your capacity building focus, because our foundation doesn't have that, and I wish we did, but I'm so glad that there are foundations that believe in that, because in other foundations, I've felt very strongly that that's an important piece of building the nonprofit community. So I want to talk a little bit about the HDR Foundation. I'm the executive director, soon to retire, actually in a transition right now. So we're going to talk about that briefly. We're a corporate foundation. We're a private foundation, and we're employee owned because our company is employee owned. We're an engineering architecture consulting firm. So our foundation mirrors our corporate goals. And you'll see that probably in most corporate foundations, that they tend to fund in support of who they are as a company. So we're employee owned, we're employee funded, and all of our grants are employee sponsored. And we'll talk a little bit about that because that makes us particularly unique. We're global. So I heard France and Africa. We fund in Canada because we have offices there. We fund in Australia and also in the UK. We do fund global organizations that have a US 501c3. Our area of focus mirrors our corporate practice and consulting. So that's healthcare. So we have a strong focus on healthcare and healthcare delivery, strong focus in education, and our third focus area is environmental stewardship. So you'll see that when you go to our website, you'll see definitions of what we mean by that and how we fund in those areas. We use Grants Connect. So if you're applying to other foundations and they also use Grant Connect, you only have to do that once. So I know a lot of organizations now are trying to make it easy for you to apply for funds, and we're part of that also. Really briefly, my role as the HDR Foundation, soon to transition to my successor, is part of the company. We don't have staff. We're a matrix company, so we tend to use our staff. We tend to use our employees in our local offices. We have 158 right here in the US, and they are our staff. They're our front line. So we're flat. And I was interested to hear you go through a strategic planning process. We did that also a couple of years ago. It hasn't affected our focus, but it confirmed that we want to stay true to our values and true to what our employees care about. We fund about $2 million a year. We raise, just like you do, Carlos, we raise our money every year and we give it away every year. So if you see our annual report, you'll see a lot of information about how we raise money, because we raise it from our employees and then distribute back. Okay, I think that's about it. All right, thank you.
Wonderful. Yeah, this is. I have questions for all of you after you finish sharing. So hopefully everybody out there, you all are noticing we have three very different foundations, and actually, I'm not even sure who the original quote is anymore. I don't know who to give credit to this anymore. But when you know one foundation, you know one foundation. I think this is a great example of that, our panel today. So with that said, I want to jump right into one of the questions that was submitted in advance. And I kind of combined the question because many people submitted some version or variety of this question. And I think this is true with, anytime we're at the beginning of a new year, a new election year, just having had the inauguration, I think a lot of people have this on their minds, which is, what are your thoughts, and by your foundation, your thoughts and feelings about the landscape of philanthropy in 2025 regarding grants specifically? So the viewers are interested in understanding, how will the new and incoming government and administration, not to mention the increased, they said disasters, but I know, Jan, there's snow in Louisiana, which is not common, I'm thinking, but some of the climate stuff throughout the United States and how that might affect or impact funding priorities of grant makers. So we'll kind of start there. And Jan, I'd love to kind of start with you to give us some context from your foundation's perspective on this.
So just to give a little more information on what you have just spoken about, Angela, in Louisiana, if we have snow, it might be an inch of snow, and we've had 8 inches of snow. So the world has changed. And so for those of you that are accustomed to it, it's beautiful. It's time to go. I'm used to heat and humidity, but let me not deter any further. So, the political landscape is going to change. Every 4 years, it's going to change. Nationally, yes, there are changes that will be taking place. Hopefully more for the better and, not too much hurt from the incoming political party coming in. But, in Louisiana, we have a new governor that is hard on crime, or harder. He's already, within a year, he's already overturned a lot of the reform that took place a handful of years ago in Louisiana that really started to save the state money, as well as put programming in prisons that were really preparing people to come out prepared to successfully reintegrate. That's going to be hurtful. We have a new mayor brought into his position in December. He really was politically inactive. He was a high school football coach. One good thing about that, and I have to look for the positives, one good thing is that he does understand the hardships of youth, as well as some of the impoverished areas of our community. And so what does that cause us to do? And the way that we look at it, it is, and it's something that we really help our nonprofit partners to really understand the power that they have. And that is educate, advocate, inform political leaders so that they are very informed as to your clients, the populations, when they're making decisions, to ensure that they're not making decisions for their political foes, partners, but really making decisions for the community. As funders, it will cause us to really think creatively, just as creatively as we really encourage our nonprofit partners to do, to think creatively of ways to be able to help the different issues, as well as gaps in funding. Is it pooling funding? Is it aligning funding? Is it, it's really just working better together to ensure that we're able to, fill some of the gaps in funding that might come. But also, as what we have been talking about, some of the weather events or, other issues that cause, challenges for our communities. How can we creatively, together, collaboratively overcome some of these challenges?
Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you. Thank you so much. Nancy, I'm going to come over to you to get to your thoughts on this question.
Well, thank you. I think I would like to start and remember 4 years ago when we were facing COVID. And we wondered whether or not we should shift all of our grant making to support COVID relief. And again, healthcare is a big part of our giving anyway. And while this was a global crisis, we stayed true to our mission, which was fund environmental stewardship, healthy communities, and education. Within that, we set aside specific targeted support for COVID relief in communities. And that gave us a number of new relationships in each of our communities, and it also strengthened our giving amongst our employees because we were doing direct relief into their communities. So, so while as I appreciate what Jan said, while we didn't completely shift our giving focus, we pivoted based on a crisis at the time. Let's look about today. There is a new administration, and there's new priorities. Should foundations shift? I'm going to quote Yogi Berra here. You never prognosticate, especially about the future. But so I probably don't want to prognosticate too much about what this is going to mean for our foundations. But I know we probably at the HDR Foundation will take special care and attention to see are there ways we can really strengthen our communities in a way that responds to unique situations that they may be facing. So,
thank you. Thank you so much. And Carlos.
Sure, thank you. I'll start off with your kind of climate disaster piece first, and I'll go into the political environment. I think what we've seen, a lot of natural disasters happening throughout the country. And I think one of the things that we have seen and we keep an eye on that a lot of cities, a lot of communities are not as prepared as they think they are for some of these natural disasters. So I just say that because then it's a lot of work then or a lot of expectations is put on our nonprofits to help go ahead and to respond. But a lot of our nonprofits don't have the capacity to all of a sudden go from serving, 50 people a day to 500 people a day. And sometimes the resources don't come in fast enough for these organizations to support them. It does go ahead and take some time. So that piece of being able to respond to disasters is not sometimes there as we would like it to be. And so my advice to nonprofits is really understand, if there is a natural disaster in your community, can your organization play a role in this? And if so, what is that role? What could be your expanded capacity? And how do you communicate to folks who are organizing services to a community? Because, as Nancy was also talking about COVID, when COVID hit, there was really no capacity for a lot of nonprofits to respond quickly on what to do. And there wasn't enough information also to go ahead and respond quickly. But yet people were looking for something. And so I think one of the things is, for nonprofits, if you want to be able to, or if you see yourself being in the space to respond, it's like really understanding what is your capacity, what is your ability, how do you communicate that, and what is the role you can go ahead and play, because you can't play everything. And I think what we saw during COVID and some other things is that you have an organization who wants to be the one stop for everyone, and that is not always going to be the case. So it's like really understand, as a nonprofit, what is the role you can play? How does it fit into the overall landscape? How do you communicate that so it can give you that advantage of how you can play a role within them? With respect to the political landscape, I think as my colleague Jan said, it changes every 4 years. Okay. So we're preparing for a change. We focus on capacity building. So what we do and what we're looking at is how do we invest in our nonprofits to navigate the next 4 years with whatever kind of capacities they need to navigate better. Okay. So is it, whatever it is, how can we be there for them so that they can go ahead and navigate these next 4 years a bit better, and to be able to go ahead and pivot the way they need to? Is it to be able to do more advocacy work? Is it able to go ahead and understand more about how new federal or executive orders play out and having to understand that and be able to communicate that? So is communication a new capacity that you need to go ahead and build up? Is it more about bringing your community together, doing more cohesion building in communities? We tend to be becoming more polarized. So some communities are wanting to invest more about on community cohesion? Do we invest in having organizations build that capacity? So we still, like as Nancy was saying, we're still in our lanes about capacity building. So we're not trying to go ahead and change what we do, but really about how is it that we can continue to stay in our lanes, but really be responsive in the ways that our communities need to be able to pivot the way they need to respond to their communities the best ways possible, and to provide that key leadership that is needed for the community as well. So.
Yeah, all of you are sharing such rich gems. I hope everyone's capturing it. I just want to lift up a couple of things. Well, one of the things I'm hearing is from all of you is like about being responsive in different ways as organizations, but certainly I'm hearing that from you all as philanthropists. And, thank you, Nancy, for bringing up the pandemic, because even though, today it almost feels like, oh yeah, several years ago, but it was only, 4 or 5 years ago now, right? And what we were able to do with very little information. So there's a little bit of some little things we have in our tool belts about what to do in times of transition. So I'm hearing, what is your lane? Stay in your lane. What is it that you do? I'm hearing building coalitions and doing it together. And certainly responsiveness is also a thing that I'm hearing in this conversation. I like to highlight some of the tidbits of takeaways that people can have from this part of the conversation. Okay, so I want to pivot a little bit from a larger context question to another question that came in, which is about building relationship. I think it kind of is the next segue here, and something that people always want to know. So we're in this time together. We're building coalitions. We're applying for funding. Sometimes it can feel daunting to grant seekers to approach different grant makers. And so the question that came in was, it would be great if the panelists could touch on best practices on how to establish a working relationship with funders from the ground up, especially when initiating communication, demonstrating interest, and working towards applying to them. So Nancy, I'm going to start with you this time.
Thank you, Angela. So I'm going to restate what I said initially, which is we're really small and we really tap our local offices and sort of use them as foundation support staff. And because all our employees sponsor requests that come to the HDR Foundation, they're the lead connection. Knowing that I'm actually part-time. I think my successor will probably be part-time, perhaps. And it's most important, especially since we have offices all over the country, that you get to know your local HDR office and some of the folks that are there. We regularly encourage local offices to do what we call lunch and learns, which is bringing nonprofits in to meet with our staff and share what you do. And our local leaders, our local area managers are always looking for ways to get folks back into the office. I mean, that's a big thing. And to have a lunch and learn, they have budget for that. So that to me is a really great way to start. And I can give a couple personal examples. My office is in the Portland area, even though our headquarters is in Omaha. And we probably do a lunch and learn once a month. And our area manager just looks around the community and finds organizations. I know, Solve, you're on this call. I think Blanche is on this call, have come into our office and gotten to know our employees and gotten to know the company. And then there was an opportunity for sponsorship. That's a little bit different than other corporate foundations, but it's the way HDR works. So, and it has been very effective.
And from your perspective, from the lunch and learn, if I'm an organization, what would you suggest that I prepare to share at a lunch and learn?
Those are usually, a half an hour, and then with Q&A. So a short PowerPoint, maybe the connection to the local community. And, I think one of the questions you had us all prepare for is, what should we do to make sure our grant application is the strongest? And I would say, read our material, read our annual reports, see what we have funded, see what we like to fund, see how we frame that particular thing. Corporate foundations uniquely have this tight connection to their company, whether they like it or not. So any good story that the corporate foundation can provide also strengthens the relationship of that company in their community. So we are always looking for those relationships and good stories, and they don't just support the foundation, but they also support the organization. They also support HDR. So
great, thank you. Jan, did you want to add something?
Nancy, if I were a nonprofit, how do I get invited to your office for the lunch and learn? That I love the idea of the lunch and learn, but I'm just thinking, how many nonprofits there are in the community? How do you determine who comes in? And for a nonprofit, how do I find out how to get in your doors?
That's a great question. And I want to go back to my role as a foundation exec. I'm an enabler and a facilitator. I'm not a decision maker. And that might be unique also to my colleagues who are really decision makers. But in the HDR Foundation, we enable what our employees do. So take the Omaha office. There's a local number and you pick up the phone and call it. And I think we've got a contact in your cover sheet about how to get a hold of each of the foundations. You can also just Google HDR in my community, and these offices come up and their direct lines come up. So cold calls are, believe it or not, people still are on the other end of the line and will pick up that call. So Jan, that's a great question. Yeah, and I know most of our nonprofits that we fund because I'm all over the country visiting, and often they began with, an HR employee was volunteering at their school, or an HDR employee was volunteering at a solve cleanup, or an HDR was, planting a tree with Friends of Trees, or some kind of relationship that said, wow, okay, come into our office and meet some of our staff, meet some other folks. So yeah, we're pretty transparent.
That's wonderful. It makes it accessible. And I think for so many grant seekers, especially new grant seekers or smaller organizations that are just getting started, it can feel so like, how do I get in there? So thank you for pulling the veil back.
Thank you, Jan, for asking. That's a great question.
Yeah, I love the idea.
I know people were out there having that same question, Jan. So thank you for being the one to bring it forward. Carlos, I'm going to turn to you and ask you this same question about, building and establishing working relationships from your foundation's perspective. I know you guys have a unique way of doing it. Also.
Yeah, well, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience fundraising, because I still have to go ahead and do that, as well as the developing relationships with grantees as well. And I've been doing this for 35 years now, so I'll just share with you kind of like my practices that I've done. First of all, reaching out to a foundation and establishing a relationship, emails, just meeting them at different events and so forth, and finding out what's the best way to contact them. But I want to just touch upon something that Nancy said, is do your homework on that foundation. I can't tell you how many times I'll run into somebody. It's like, oh, how do I get funded? And it's like, I'll start asking them some questions and they have nothing about our organization, our foundation. They don't know anything. And it's like, so if you want me to meet with you, you don't know about us, am I supposed to, am I supposed to be vetting you right now or whatever? So do your homework, really, where you fit in within their priorities, how the work that you do aligns with the work that they're looking to fund and so forth. The second piece, once you get a meeting with them or able to have a conversation, is really what's that conversation about? I think, I can't tell you how many times I will meet with someone and they're not prepared to have a conversation about, applying for a grant. They haven't done their homework with their priority areas, but most important, how the work that they do, fits in to our mission, our vision of how we want to go ahead and invest in advanced community. And so I look, when I have conversations with grantees, does this organization know where it's at right now, with everywhere from its life cycle, where it's at in its trajectory, how it is looking to advance its mission and its vision, and how does the work that it's doing aligns with the overall strategy of the organization. And it's amazing how many organizations, first of all, don't have a strategic plan, don't have a strategy in place, and they're just looking for funding to keep, the wheels moving, but there's no strategy. And so when I have conversations with grantees, I'm like, okay, so how does this work really fit into your overall strategy? Communicate that with me. The other piece that I see that it's missing a lot is they'll talk about the impact or the work that they do, but they don't really paint a picture for me to understand how their work is really impacting families, individuals, and also their community. So, for example, they may be talking about funding their after-school program. Oh, we serve so many kids every day and and whatever. I will then ask, well, how many youth are in your community in the age group that you just talked to me about? It's amazing because sometimes they won't even know. Okay. And
so
it's
more specificity.
Right. Well, it's like, paint a picture for me. In our community, we have 5,000 kids between this age. These are the challenges that they're having. Our organization is responding to and supporting them in X manner. And this is the outcome. This is the impact we're having, so that in 3 to 5 years, this is where we want to be able to go ahead and see them and start developing, this work contributes to building a pipeline of young leaders. But you're painting a bigger picture for me of how you're really looking to go ahead and not only support a youth, but how that youth then, through your programs and so forth, goes back and supports their family, supports their community. And now we're looking at really, how are we looking to transform a community through the work that you're doing, and not just, on the hamster wheel, just turning, things around without that bigger. So when an organization comes to me and is able to explain and paint that bigger picture, I then know that this organization really understands what's going on in that community, and higher probability that I'm going to say, I want to go ahead and fund you.
Yeah.
And so
this really makes me think about the question that we were going to get to in just a moment, but it kind of feels like it's present right now, which is, when they're telling that story, Carlos, what kind of data from your foundation's perspective? So they have an idea of that, what the children need. What kind of data works well in applications from your perspective?
Okay, so the one thing also,
is the data the thing? Yeah, because
data is very helpful. Okay, but give me data that builds upon your story. Don't give me data that's not really relevant and stuff. Present data that really impacts the work that you do. Okay, and helps to paint a picture of what you're looking to address, what you're looking to support in your community, and so forth. So that kind of information helps me to understand more about the operating environment you're in, how it is that you're looking to go ahead and support your community. Because then I understand the bigger piece that you go ahead and do. And it just gives me that better understanding to go ahead and do. And especially for us, because our grant making is a little different. So for some of our grant opportunities, we just ask for like a 2-page concept paper first. Okay, so we don't ask for, give me your board list, give me all your financials. It's kind of like, answer some questions to paint that story. And if this story that you painted is one that, becomes interested, we become interested in, then we follow up. And then if we're wanting to give you a grant, then we ask for the rest of the information to go ahead and vet you. So we start off that way. and start developing a relationship with you. And then if it's something that we want to invest in, then we ask for financials, we ask for, some of the other things that folks, but we don't ask for everything up front. Because we're wanting to see where it is, and we want to start developing a relationship with folks.
Great, thank you. Okay, Jan, I'm going to turn towards you. We're on this question. There's so much rich things. I feel like we're doing our whole week-long training in like an hour. There's so many good gems and tidbits on applications and building relationships. But we are talking about how to, from your foundation's perspective or your professional perspective, building and working with funders from the ground up when you have interest.
Well, as Angela, as you had said in the introduction, that cliche of when you've seen one foundation, you've seen one, but it is so real. It is so real. I mean, even from the conversations that the three of us have had here. But really, in establishing that relationship, it is doing the research, which has already been discussed, of who is the person, what are their priorities? Who is the person? Who is the corporation? Whatever that might be. What are their priorities? What makes them tick? When you get your foot in the door and you're in front of them, are they moved by numbers? Are they moved by how well you function as a business? And let me take a side turn on that one. A nonprofit is a business. And the planning that Carlos was just talking about is very important. And that truly shows the strength of your organization. Do you have a strategic plan? Do you have a business plan? Do you have a fundraising plan? That shows that collectively, your organization, your board, your employees agree on the direction of that organization. So it is very important to be able to convey that to the audience that you have, whether it be an individual or a corporation. So getting your foot in the door that's the hard one. But recognize that a personal visit will have a success rate because it is face-to-face. But that may work, it may not. So what other ways can you connect? Is it with a personal letter that has a strong success rate, but not typically as strong? And always follow up. When you make that contact, follow up with them, whether it be by a phone call or a letter or an email. But each one of those, the visit is most effective. Letter, a little less. A call or an email. Each one goes a little bit less as to the success rate of getting them to connect with your organization. And that connection point is very important. As I said, it may be a person that you're visiting with where the business side is very important. So that's important to attend to and make sure that you're connecting with them that way. But they may be more of a person that is moved initially off of the passion, the feel. And so do you start out with talking about, the personal attributes of your clients, or a testimony from the life experiences of your clients? And it may be something, just as an example, it may be asking a business owner how much of their staff can survive in making the ALICE wages. So for those that are not familiar, ALICE is a United Way program where they are surveying and establishing what it takes to survive on a basic budget in that community. And this is done nationwide. And in Baton Rouge, the ALICE annual income needs to be $34,164 or $17.08 an hour. How much of that person's staff is able how much of his staff or her staff earns $17. How much of their staff can function in, survive in their community. That would be very telling, because that really not only has them looking at their own internal business, but what the challenges are of the greater community where they live. In Baton Rouge, we have 51% of those that are Alice or below. So you connect and you get that person really thinking about who your clients are. There's great connection there. And as what the second part of your question of the data, it's always good, but even as Carlos said, how does that data attend or defend your cause, your population? Start out with national, come to statewide. And for us, what is the greater Baton Rouge area? What are the statistics of the population in our area? And if you're able to show and find statistics that really defend your ask, that is most important.
Thank you.
Angela, can I just say something?
Absolutely.
I forgot to, and when Jan was speaking right now, it just triggered. When you're talking about relationships, I think one of the things also that I see a lot, is that once an organization gets a grant, they kind of like just step back away and they don't really keep that funder abreast of what's going on. I'll give you everywhere from like last year, we gave like 170 grants. I might have gotten 12, letters thanking us for the grant. Okay. I would say that one of the probably things that a bad practice is that a lot of grantees, a lot of nonprofits don't take the time to personally write a letter that really reflects how that grant is going to make an impact on that organization and thank them for it. It just doesn't happen. And it's like, wow, here you worked on this, you got a grant, and then you just kind of like don't continue cultivating that relationship. And cultivating starts with thanking people properly.
Yeah.
Hey, Carlos, I'll add to that. That thank you doesn't have to be anything big. It doesn't have to be a plaque. It doesn't have to be a simple letter. A simple email is all it needs to be.
Yep.
No money needs to be spent on it unless it is the card, and just a piece of stationery and a stamp. That stamp, the cost of a stamp is expensive enough nowadays. But I digress. But very simple communication. But it is, as Carlos has said, that continual connection with the grantor.
Yeah, this is great. It's one of the things you guys are lifting up is, and we talk about this in our training all the time. It's like grant makers aren't ATM machines. Insert grant proposal, out comes funding, and that's it. But I want to, since you brought it up, there's this one of the live questions that came in was about, and it has to do with communication. Is let's say their application is declined. So what's the best way for like follow-up feedback? Do you all give feedback for the next round? Or should they, is there something an organization should do or communicate if they're declined? Nancy, what do you think?
Sure. Thank you. And I just want to echo my support for everything Carlos and Jan said. Our system, again, we use the Grants Connect portal. Our system allows for the recipient of a grant to go back in and give us information, thank us if you want, but just update us on what you're doing. And again, because we're an employee-based foundation, we, uploading photographs or stories, we send that back out to our donors. We have 6,000 donors. Those are our employees. So anything that we receive from a grant recipient, it is very helpful in not only cementing that relationship, but also informing the others in our foundation community who are your supporters. So declines. In the Grant Connects portal, there is access to me personally, and there will be access to my successor. And I welcome those calls. Matter of fact, I had made a tradition. I've been with the foundation for close to a decade, and my tradition has been for the recipients who receive grants, our employee sponsor gets to make those calls, and for the declines, I make those calls. So I have called every nonprofit organization who's been declined because I like that opportunity to say, often I just get a voicemail, but I use that opportunity to say, if you have questions about how to strengthen your proposal going forward, I'm welcome to visit with you about that. That is my job, and that's my job to help as many nonprofits get successful and accessing our funds as possible. So I feel like that's very much a part of my job. Other corporate foundations that I've worked for don't feel that way. So it just really depends. But I would start by taking advantage of any olive branch that the foundation would give to you about if you would like to visit with one of our staff or specifically with the executive director on how to strengthen your proposal going forward. Please take full advantage of that. And, that to me is very, very helpful. I want to support what Carlos said and what Jan said also about doing your due diligence up front. And again, because we have a grant portal that allows you to give information, both data and also narrative, personal narrative. Use that portal and follow the instructions. I cannot tell you how many denials we've ultimately had to make because we just didn't know what you wanted. In the application, we said, what is it you're after? And we get a long, sort of almost a cut paste of who they are as an organization, but we have no idea what they were after. So it's like, okay, I don't know what they want. And those tend to go to the bottom of the pile. So be clear about what you're after and follow the instructions.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Your question is like a 2-for-1. And I'm going to ask each of the other two panelists to do similar. This combining with, how to initiate a declination and couple that with, any tips that you have for a successful application as we're nearing the top of the hour. So Jan, I'm going to turn to you and then I'll come to you, Carlos.
Okay. Sometimes we run out of funds. And that is, there's just so much there's so much need. There's typically, at the very least, 1.5 times the amount being requested as we have funds. So we run out of funds. Now, what do you do to lift yourself up, to be stronger, to be qualify more for the funding as compared to others? Basically, as Nancy has said, follow the instructions, answer the question. Simple. It sounds simple. And but also, our grant application has attachments to it. Who's going to run the program? What is the program budget? What is your organizational budget? What is your financial package? A 990 board list. All of those attachments, when you are a well-run organization, those are all very powerful and provide a lot of information as to how your organization operates. Your 990 is very telling. Your board list is very telling. Us being so geographic specific, we know people in the community. We can tell by names on your board as to, how much support an executive has. But there again, on the executive director side, use the expertise of your board members. They will help you strengthen your organization, help fill skill gaps that you may have. But there again, let me go back to your attachments are very important, and each one helps to show the strength of your organization, the resilience, how well you would be able to continue the program or project once the funding finishes. So as to a declination, really look at how strong of a picture you show to that grantor through the documents including your grant application, how strong you portray your organization through that grant application.
Thank you. And Carlos?
So I'll start off with the declination piece first, and I think it's like, how do you approach a funder on your declination? And I just say that because I've had everything from, I should have got funded. I need a meeting with you, your board chair. I'm going to be there with my board chair, and we need to have a conversation. Well, what does that set up? Because I think going back, we decline things because they're incomplete, because people don't answer all the questions properly, the things that just Jan and Nancy just shared with. Okay. And it's amazing how many people just don't do that. They don't answer the question. They don't provide all the information. And as a funder, we're taking the whole package into consideration when we're making a funding decision. We're not just taking pieces here, pieces there. We're using the whole package of information that we're collecting from you to make a decision. So was it, so I would say that if I got declined and I wanted to go ahead Nancy or Jan about why I got declined, was it because our program did not align with your priority areas? Is it because our application was incomplete? Is it because our documentation was not in order? Try and be a little bit more specific about why it was that declination. And you're probably going to get a better response of someone following up with you and saying, this is why your proposal was declined and so forth. And I guess on the tip side, I can't just stress what Jan and Nancy said, is follow the instructions, answer the questions, provide the information that they need, and just really be succinct to it. And I think sometimes, like Nancy was saying, you're asking for information and they send you something else, or it's just that they ramble, and then we don't have time to figure out, does A connect with D over here with C, or, do I need to read this proposal 2 or 3 times to try and make sense? Is this what they're saying, or is this what they're saying? And when we're questioning that, then that's probably going to be a no.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I've been doing this training for 15 years. I think you just literally summarized like that section of be succinct, answer the question, follow the directions. So thank you so much. So anybody who's been in my class, I told you, it wasn't just me picking it up. Okay, you all, thank you so much. I can't believe this conversation has just been rich and warm and flowing, and we're at the top of the hour already. So what I'd love to do is just go around one final time in our last 2 minutes, just give each of you an opportunity for a closing remark. And I'm just going to do the way I see you on my screen, which is I'm going to start with you, Jan, Carlos, and then end with Nancy.
Well, I think that, one, thank you all very much, not only for having me join this, but also to Carlos and Nancy for, just sharing our thoughts on the work that we do on a daily basis. As you can tell, we're all very passionate about the work. And so being able to share our work, it was very, very appreciative. And on that note, it is, staff or grantors are very passionate about their work also. And we take it seriously. But as what has been said in the very beginning, we're human also. And so it is about relating to that donor. And it is on a personal basis, a relationship, but it's also on a business side of it. And both of those points are very important to grant making, grant writing. And so I hope that the information that has been shared it helps each person, each participant here today, a little further along in their journey of working in the nonprofit sector. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Carlos?
Very quickly, be bold, courageous, and advocate for the work that you do and for the funds that you need to do your work.
I just want to say thank you also for giving us your time. And Carlos, I'm really curious about that photograph behind you. Someday you have to tell us what that is. But I'm sure there's a very powerful story. We all have really powerful stories. Tell us. We want to support you. We're here because of you. That's why foundations even exist. So remember that. So thank you, Angela. Thank you, Jan, Kathleen, Carlos, everyone.
Thank you. And I just have to, in the Q&A, I see, thank you. This has been incredibly helpful. The perspectives from the other side really humanizes the process and demystifies quite a bit. Such helpful information. Thank you so much. So it goes on and on and on. So we can't see your faces, but just know that the audience is very appreciative of everything that you all have shared today. So I want to thank each of you for being here for this hour, this conversation, and really offering us all some insight and inspiration, I'd say, for our grant seeking. And I want to also thank participants out there for all of your great questions. I know we didn't get to all of them, but we appreciate that. We appreciate you being here and offering them as part of the conversations. And I also want to thank again our sponsors, the Grantsmanship Center, Grant Station, Foundant, all for coming together and making these conversations possible. I think we all need these places and spaces to come together and share and learn and be inspired. So save the date. The very next panel, as I mentioned, we do them once a quarter. So the very next panel with another group of really wonderful panelists is coming up. Mark it, Wednesday, April 23rd, same time. I was about to say same bat time, same bat channel. I guess I just did. But we'll be here again, same time, but just on April 23rd, 2025. And we hope to see you there. You'll get a reminder email. So on behalf of the Grantsmanship Center and all of our sponsors, thank you all so much for being here and good luck.